Sometimes we don't know what we fully love, but life shows us what those things are, you know?
As an introduction to this, I'm going to say that we did do a topical chat quite a while ago at this point on imposter syndrome. And the turnout for that was a lot higher than I thought it would be. And the sense that, we all had experienced this in our own way was also a lot more widespread than I thought it would be. Especially I see people as successful, but they may, struggle with their own battle of confidence that I don't see behind the scenes. So we started talking about how we define success. And that's where we're going to pick up today. We're going to talk about how we define success and, how we might be able to learn from one another to go about what we do even better. So, introducing this topic, some of us had recently read The Sport of Business by Mark Cuban, and he proposes in that some interesting discussion questions in the chapter titled, "What Are You Destined to Be?" So he shares that personally, he always enjoyed business, but he never knew he had an aptitude for technology until he took a job at a bank. Kind of surrounding, how you see yourself as a successful person, I'm going to propose some kind of philosophical questions. So, do you think we know what we are destined to be, or do we find that out through our experiences? Are some of us really good at something and it's just a matter of discovering it? Do we all have something that we would love to do every day and we inherently know it, or do we have to find it? And will what you love to do be the same as what you are great at?
No way.
No?
That last questions really get me because the thing is, um, well, I actually started liking programming, but I never loved it. I found it really, really boring. Like to sit in the front of computer and to stare at a screen with a dark background and a lot of small letters in it. That's not appealing to me. For the longest time, I've worked as a salesperson for my company because, oh, it was too much. If I stay doing programming all the time, I started going crazy. But that's the thing. I'm really talented at it.
Interesting.
My clients and colleagues convinced me that I'm really good at it, actually. And even like people that work with me and they were in my team, I was leading them and I didn't actually do that much programming, but they recognize and they call me and say, dude, you taught me so much and it was so amazing experience to work with you. And I was like, really? Do you think I'm actually good at programming? And these guys are like, yeah, you're like one of the best programmers I know. And I was like, seriously?
That's so interesting. Okay. So you feel like it found you.
Yeah, I mean, I studied advertising. I started programming as a hobby, but as I started my company, we started doing advertising like paper advertising on magazines and this kind of stuff, radio, TV, whatever. But then we started developing websites and I was really good at it. And then I followed this path and I started creating more complex websites and then started involving a lot more programming. And then I started having people that work with me that were programmers. So I learned with them also. And sometimes if there are too much work, I would jump in and try to do stuff and tinker around. And that found me, and it's a very good profession. It pays well. So I made peace with that. But if you ask me what I wanted to be since I was a kid or whatever, I never thought like about staying all day long sitting in front of a computer programming. Like I always wanted to be an actor or
That's what I was going to say. What did you dream of? Okay.
Yeah, or a musician, have my own rock band or something, or being a DJ. So that's why I studied advertising, because it was a little bit closer to art than different kind of subjects that I could choose. So and programming, that's not a lot of art actually. So I usually tend to like to better work with front end development, because yeah, it still has a little bit of interface. So it could be a little bit closer from what I studied, and the skills I already had on art or design. That's something that found me. So this question really touched something in me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Does anyone else want to respond to that? So, just as a refresher, the question Daniel was responding to is, will what you love to do be the same as what you are great at? And then some of the other questions kind of linked to that, are, do we know what we're destined to be, or do we find that through experience? And do we all have something we would love to do every day and inherently know it, or do we have to find it?
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, Carlos. Welcome.
So, trying to answering your questions, Nancy, I will say, as you may all know, I teach English as a second language. It is something that I never thought of. Even when I was in high school, I always said something like, hey, I want to do that. And to teach teenagers, I won't ever do that. I'm sorry. And suddenly, I tried to teach at the university and it didn't work, to undergraduate students and so on. And suddenly life itself sent me somehow to teach to teenagers. And at the moment, I have been teaching teenagers for about 6 years now. And let me tell you that it is a very rewarding experience. So sometimes we don't know what we fully love, but life shows us what those things are. It has been that way for me, because even I'm industrial engineer, and if you ask me what have you done about engineering, and I will say, yeah, I have done some things, but mostly I've been teaching, and that's fine. And I love that. I really love that. So, and what I really do, and Nancy and everyone, is that in my case, when I am teaching, I try to have fun every single class. If I can't have fun, I won't teach that day. I always have fun teaching. Sometimes I have more fun, sometimes I am a bit quieter, but I try to have fun. And it really pays off. Even when sometimes my students come in a class a bit sad, or stressed, I say, okay, imagine this space or this classroom is located in Switzerland or in Washington or in Boston, or somewhere else. So let's leave everything behind the door and let's enjoy the class. And that way it has been working for me.
I agree with you. And honestly, what you're saying about making fun, I think applies to me too. I was talking with a colleague, and she was sort of sharing that she had become bored. And I was thinking, I take responsibility for that at this point. Like, if I'm bored with what I'm doing, I am in a profession that I know I enjoy. So it's my responsibility to make it not boring, like, because if it becomes boring for your case too, right? If it becomes boring to me, how is it not going to become boring to the people that you're teaching, right?
Exactly, exactly. And let me tell you, we have had very hard times, because sometimes I am teaching and suddenly we have a blackout, for 3 hours. No speaker, no laptop, nothing. So we have to figure that out and we have to do something else. And it's been challenging. And I also, Nancy, I wonder, what do you guys think about income? Because let me tell you something. I teach English because I really enjoy that. And of course, I get an income from it, but it isn't my goal. I mean, I am not a money driven person. That's the proper term. I'm not sure. I would like to hear your thoughts.
This is a great transition. Daniel was touching on this before we started recording too. So, how there are a lot of people, as you said, Daniel, that make a lot of money and are very unhappy. How much money do we need to be making to be successful, to feel successful, and maybe more deeply feel fulfilled?
That's a weird thing, actually, because we do have a story here in Brazil that we usually tell. So there's this business guy. So he's at the beach, and he's looking at the sunset. It's really amazing. He's there by himself. He's on vacation, so he's enjoying the sunset. So then comes a fisherman, and he's just leaving his boat, walking in the sand as the sun sets. And then the entrepreneur looks at the fisherman and say, "Hey, man, why don't you start a fish business, and you can have a lot of businesses around the entire country and can be really successful like me?" And the fisherman looks at him, "So what's the benefit of me being as successful as you are?" And he says, "So you can enjoy the sunset when you're in vacation. I take a vacation every year, and I come here and I see the sunset is so amazing." And then the fisherman looks at him and say, "Hey, dude, I see this sunset every day. Do you think I really want to start a company? Do you think I want to work in an office? Are you kidding me?" Like, maybe the fisherman is so much more successful than the businessman, because the fisherman goes there, fishes, and he lives by the beach, and he has a great slow-paced life. He has time to be with his kids and with his family. He doesn't need to have the best, like the newest car, the best house, or he can just live there. He's already in paradise. So why would he move to the city or start a business and have a lot of companies everywhere? So then he can once a year enjoy that sunset. No, so that's something we usually tell here in Brazil. I know that Brazil is a huge country, so we have different kind of cultures inside the country, and but I see that in big cities we have all this competition. People joke about your car if it's old, and you're always like feeling like that is competing with you. But for me, what happens is when I moved to the countryside and I was living for 3 years in my family's ranch. It's such an amazing, every day is such a great day because you're there by nature, and I can't describe that easily, but it's so rewarding. It feels like that's the goal, like to be in peace with yourself and to be in somewhere peaceful. So then I started sharing some of this with my friends, and some of them are also entrepreneurs. They have their own company, or they're on the software business or something. So they're really successful, let's say money wise. It was a time that I wasn't making as much because I do work with something that is usually a risk. So it was when the pandemic hit, and as I work with something that is risky, like a mobile app, so a lot of projects were canceled, and I wasn't making that much money. So, but anyways, my friends would call me and say, "Oh man, I wish I was there. I wish I could live away from the city, just the way as you're living right now. You're living the life." And it's so funny because, on a sense, they found me more successful than them just because I was living in a place that was much more peaceful. And that's the thing, right? Also, like when I started my YouTube channel, there's a friend of mine. He's a software engineer, and when he discovered that I think I had a 20,000 subscribers or something, and he called me like, we haven't talked for some time, just shows up and called me, and he's like, "Dude, that's amazing." He was like, "You're the man. That's so good." And in my vision, he's much more successful than I am, but in his vision, I am more successful than he is, because he really wanted to do something like that. And even like if it's like he makes a lot of more money in his job than I do at YouTube, or being like in social media, but still he finds that, like, he says, "Okay, oh man, you're so comfortable with the camera and stuff. I wish I could do that." And that's the thing, like you never know, and how people see you and how things actually are. So For me, when I started changing this, and also I think a lot of people went through this in the last years because of the crisis and stuff that we lived. We started caring a lot more about health than the other things. So I think a lot of us passed through that, but it hit me so hard that I was so focused on just like making money and making good deals and working a lot to buy stuff I don't need and I don't like just to impress people that don't care about me. That changed a lot for me, redefining what success really is. Sometimes it's hard because people they don't define success the way you define. So they might see you as a loser or they can see you as a winner. It only depends on their views. And sometimes you have to block that from your mind so people don't go inside your head and put ideas that you're successful or not. You're the one that has to define what success is to you, and then you chase that.
That's another good point. You brought up several good points that I want to break down, if that's okay. I really enjoyed that parable. You made a couple points that the grass is always greener. We can kind of look at someone else's life as successful. And then kind of going back to this original point about, how much money do we need to be making to feel successful and feel fulfilled? Maybe it isn't money at all that should be used as the metric. Before we leave that in the dust, though, I will share, I was looking for a more recent study because of inflation, the cost of living changes, but in most of the research that's been done about how much money makes us happy, it caps out at some point. So it looks like the current cap out point might be around 250,000, which is a good income, I would say. But the point at which it's no longer just giving you options, maybe you feel like you have every option. And so the point of return becomes less. But so anyway, I'll share that article if anyone's interested in some of the studies that have been done on this like happiness index. But I think, to your point, Daniel, do we measure success by our own standards or do we measure it by someone else? And I have this in this Hot Ones interview for those of you that watch that show. Sean Evans, the interviewer, was saying to Lady Gaga, how do you know you've cracked the code on a hook? And she said, sometimes I know something is done because it just feels whole to me, but you really don't know something is good until the people tell you. So, that was making me think, you have this standard for yourself of measuring success. And then you also have this standard, measuring it by other people, measuring quality that they feel you're bringing to them. So maybe both are relevant. Does anyone else have an opinion on that? Do you think it's important to just measure success for yourself? Or do you think it's also, or instead, more important to measure it by other people?
I can try to jump in. I will say even people around me can tell me, honestly speaking, if I'm good to do something and maybe I reach a sort of success, let's say in terms of I can help someone if I feel I did a good action to another person. I can or she can give me sort of prize or a smile, and this is a sort of success in some way. So it maybe two sides of the coin, doing something and understand around me, around the neighbors, if I made someone happier or at the opposite, I can try to adjust my action. So this is basically my opinion in few words.
Yeah, and do you think, your personal sense of self is independent of, if you feel successful about something, is that independent of the value that you're bringing others? Or do you think it's dependent on that?
It depends on what I do around me. I mean, I will not make it as a number. So success, to reach a certain goal that is fixed, the income. We have said something like that. It's a matter of happiness. At the end of the day, I feel that I reach some success in terms of I feel better than the day before. This is what, in my opinion, matters at the end, or in the months, in the years, for a person, for me at least.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, and Daniel, you had something you wanted to share too?
Yeah. The thing is, what I think sometimes is that some things you actually do great things and you don't even know, right? So when working as a consultant, and when I started to create projects for clients, and when I presented them, sometimes I was surprised that for me it was just like a regular average kind of work. It was like it could be better, right? I always like maybe a little bit of a perfectionist sometimes. I usually say, like, sometimes you just abandon, like especially like with video editing or design. You could always improve, like, forever, but you have a deadline and you have to present it to the client, or you have to release it, right? So, but actually sometimes when you show that to the client, or you release something, the feedback you get, they just say, you're like, wow, it's blown us away, and it's so perfect, and you don't even realize that what you've done, it's way more than you thought you were doing, right? So sometimes feedback is really important, because all of this the imposter syndrome. Everyone is imposter syndrome. Everyone is imposter until they do it, right? And it's like any idea is crazy until you're successful with it. As soon as you actually, like, you say, I'm gonna do this or do that, and you start doing it, you still don't know that you're capable. You think you have the potential to do it, right? But then you actually do it and someone gives you feedback, then you feel like, all right, now I'm on the right path. And the other thing that I've experienced is that when people start copying you, like they really copy what you're doing, and sometimes you get a little, let's say, upset about it. Like I had a experience that my company had a website that a guy really, it really inspired one of the of the companies that were competing with us, and I got really upset about it. So then a friend of mine tell me, like, dude, if they're copying you, you are the original. Like, you're really doing something that is that good that someone want to copy you. So you should be proud of that. You shouldn't be angry or upset about it. You should be really proud. And I that changed my perspective on this, and that sometimes we don't know until someone tells us, and sometimes we think it's not good enough, but actually it could be perfect. So that's one of the things, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can definitely relate to that part about not knowing when art is finished, which is why that Lady Gaga quote really resonated with me, and to what you're saying, about your standards being higher than the customers. And in a way, I think that is a good thing. You just want to make sure that you're still using your time efficiently, because that means that you see room for growth that your customer can't see. So hopefully that gives you more success over time. Hi there. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you mind leaving us a review, a like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Thanks so much. That really helps our reach. The Founders Voyage podcast is now proudly sponsored by VidOps. Kane at VidOps has been taking care of our editing since early 2024. He works efficiently, and I'm sure you'll agree that he does a great job. Thank you to VidOps for helping bring this podcast to life. If you want the same great support we're getting for your podcast, or you need help with video, photography, or animation, you can get 10% off at vidops.io using our referral code Voyage. That's vidops.io, referral code Voyage. Now back to the show. I definitely agree with what your friend's saying about imitation is the highest form of flattery, is what we often say in the US.
Oh, I never heard that.
Yeah, well, you shared a good Brazilian parable with me, so that's what I share with you. But I totally agree with your friend, because sometimes, as we know too in entrepreneurship, right, like the first to market is not necessarily the best. It could be, but when people start copying, then they start iterating, and sometimes they push that original person to be even that much better, right? People copying you is not only complimentary, it helps our growth, and we need it. Your take on imposter syndrome is very interesting, though. What did you say? That you are an imposter until you prove you can do it? Is that what you said?
Uh, and not it's not to prove, like, because when we say prove, is it's weird. I think the take that I give is you're an imposter until you do it. Like everyone has the potential to be something, right? To do something, but everyone is an imposter until they actually do it. That's the feeling that I think. So I'm not a psychologist or anything. I don't know. It's just my opinion. So what I feel is that sometimes we are really frightened or afraid or do something. We have this a vision of ourselves that we are not capable of doing, because sometimes we have really big challenges or really big goals, right? So the thing is, you will feel like an imposter while you're doing it. And as soon as you get it done, then you see, no, I'm not an imposter. I actually am capable of doing that. So at some given time, like, everyone was an imposter. Because if you think about it, like when you go to college and maybe you're studying engineering, maybe you're studying anything else, on the beginning, you're not able, like, let's say you're studying engineering, like you want to design a bridge. You're not going to be able to design a bridge. You're not meant to do that. You weren't born. There's no way people can think that they have a gift from birth, because we all wake up, we don't know how to talk. There's no way I can accept that people say that, oh, you have to have a natural talent to do that. No, you can do it. No, that's what I think. So everyone's an imposter.
Babies are the ultimate imposter.
Yeah, they can't even talk. So you're gonna tell me, right? They start screaming until they start talking. That's the
Right.
way. You
Yeah.
you it's when they say fake it to make it. That's a thing that you guys say in America, right? You have to fake, because that's not faking. You're actually doing it as you are doing. Like, I wanna be seen as a successful businessman. I'm gonna wear a suit. But as doing that, you're already like, I'm dressed up for this. It's just like when you put maybe camouflage to go to war. I don't know, something like that. You're not going to go to be a Olympic swimmer wearing jeans, right? So you would say that a person that is using like clothes that are the apparel that is used to be an Olympic champion and is training, that he's a faker until he makes it. No, that makes no sense for me. You're already doing it. So it's not that. I think it's more about the perception that people have about you. Because okay, if I show up on shorts and a flip flop and with a regular T-shirt to do a consulting meeting with you, you're gonna look at me and say, "What is this guy doing here?" It's gonna be crazy. But if I show up in a suit, you respect me because I respect you, because you see, like, oh, this guy dressed up to come here to my company to talk to me. So that's not faking it. That's making it. That's the thing I always think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, that saying is definitely a saying for people that feel that feeling of imposter syndrome. And that's the syndrome part, right? Like, you're actually doing this, other people see you doing this, and they say, wow, look, he's a very capable swimmer, he's a very capable designer, but you yourself feel very incapable and you feel like everyone else around you is so much more capable. That's the syndrome part. And you're absolutely right. This is a mindset that we can get fixed in rather than something that is actually happening. Because you can be, and I think this is how we wound up, with some people that I didn't expect joining for the imposter syndrome conversation last time, because you can be on paper what other people see as very successful and still feel inferior. And it's that feeling part that you have to sort out in order to really feel like you're thriving, and maybe to really thrive, because I do feel like those mental barriers hold us back in some way from our true potential. Even if we are able to make money, even, make multiple successful companies, it's holding us back from enjoying that and from thriving and maybe challenging ourselves to grow in another respect. So Giovanni typed something here. Do you want to read that aloud, or do you want me to read it?
Can read. I mean, this is my opinion about imposter syndrome. I believe it can happen when I feel I'm not as good as I meant to be to reach that goal. So I try to imagine how another person that, in my opinion, is better than me to do that thing. I try to inspire myself on that person in my mind to complete that task, to do that activity. However, it happened when I was younger, maybe it can happen right now, of course. But I understood anyone has his way to interpret the reality. Anyone is good or has his particular way to do an activity. And so is, or my superpower is different from another one. And so it's better at the end to be ourselves, in few words.
Sure. I think also, to your last point, thinking about, sure, there's so many graphic designers that do what I do. There's so many, for me, there's so many fitness professionals that do what I do. So what makes my version of it different, like defining the secret sauce, going back to the 24 steps. And once you kind of get a handle on that, I actually think that is the best way to sort through some of that imposter syndrome and feeling like maybe, you're just white noise in a sea of people.
I want to ask a question for you guys. So, do you guys think that imposter syndrome sometimes comes from comparison? Like, and it's hard not to compare ourselves with other people. That's the feeling I have. So, I try not to compare that as much as I used to do, because sometimes it's just luck, or it's just the opportunities that life gave for each of us. And if we compare with other people, their whole history is different from ours. So it's really hard. Maybe also the opportunities that came to them wasn't the same. It was just different, right? So that's what I think sometimes, that maybe we stop comparing ourselves to the others and we compare ourselves to what we were and what we are right now, and how the progress we're doing and what our own goals are, because maybe we don't have the same goals as everyone. Right?
Yeah, ultimately, I agree with you. And I think the answer to your question is yes. But I do think it's also influenced, and it took me a long time to realize this. I can decide what I am inputting, right? So I can go and look at all of the fitness trainers on Instagram that are very unlike me and compare myself to them and say, oh, I'm not that, and use it to feel bad about myself for any number of reasons. Or I can say, one of my strengths is being able to coach people through the barriers that they can't see, the ones that are mental. And I can educate myself, and I can, read about psychological studies that have been done that's going to help me be better at being a good me, or I can feed myself, something that I am not, and then just feel inferior. So it kind of, to me, feels like the data analyst thing that Brian says to me sometimes about, if you have like a garbage data set, like how are you going to expect results you can use? So I have to feed myself a data set that suits what I'm trying to produce.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, I just want to point out that what you're saying, like talking, it's really easy to say that, right? But it takes a lot of being really mature to understand when you're like looking at different professional in your area, or even by people personally that seem or are more successful than you, in a way that you feel that they are actually, they achieved some things that you still wanna go there and achieve. And what I think sometimes is it takes a lot of maturity, and you have to be really on a good mindset that you actually admire the achievements of that person, instead of being jealous or envious about the things that these people achieved, and you're just looking like, oh, I wanted to be there, I wanted to be doing the same things. And it's hard. I think it's not easy, and it's not natural as to admire within. I think like in our inside, on our basic instincts, we feel that we should be there in their place, and that we deserve that achievements. But it takes a lot of being a grown up to understand that you can see these people and say, oh, good for them, that's awesome, wow, and not be like, oh, I wish that was me, they don't deserve it, I deserve it. That's hard to do, not because we do that consciously. In my opinion, we do that in our unconscious mind, and we have to reason that and think that, oh, that's just my instinct, that just what my brain does since I was a child, and now I have to fight it and to actually be great that these people exist. And sometimes people say, oh, why are you doing a business on this area, or why are like creating content for this subject? There are a lot of people doing it. The reply I give to the people is usually not the one they expect, because I say, oh, so that's a validated idea already, right? If someone is doing it, it's because it works. So sometimes you have to think like this, you say, okay, if this guy's achieved this, I could as well. And it's not that there's just that opportunity. There are not different opportunities that we can tackle, and the market is big. So if you start thinking like this, you're actually more capable of dealing with. Even like there are people that they don't talk with companies that are like, it's funny, but because when we are like passing our service to a different company because the client wants, or we don't want to work with them anymore or something, they think we're going to treat the other contractor badly, but it's usually the opposite. We treat them so well and with respect, and I try to make everything as easy as I can to that transition to be made, because I respect them. I'm happy that we have other companies working, because the market's so big, we wouldn't be able to consulting for every company that exists in Brazil. So it's good that these guys exist, and it's good that we can work with them, even if we're helping them to get the work we were doing for our client, and now they're doing. So I see that people value this, and it's really rare, actually. It's really, really rare. So people can be hostile when they're working with other company that it's in the same market as them. It's the basic like jealousy or envy. But I see differently. See, we all could partner up. We can do things together, and we can build better things.
I really appreciate you sharing, kind of the personal growth journey you've been on, where you feel like you've moved to that place where you can more genuinely celebrate other people's successes. That's really wonderful. Carlos, can I pass to you?
Yeah, sure. So sometimes it comes after comparing someone. But of course, there are some factors involved, such as our beliefs, and especially how we grew up, because our childhood is very important on that. I mean, if you are, or if you were a child who always were told, hey, look at how he or she, I mean, someone else is doing this instead of you, why you do this or that, and blah, 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 sometimes it affects you. And at the moment, everything is a bit different because we realize, or at least some people realize, that everyone is a different, unique, or each person is unique. I mean, and sometimes we don't need to label things, to tag things. Not everything is right or wrong. Sometimes things are what those things are. It is what it is. So I will say that.
Yeah, thank you. And I completely agree with you. I want to think that the intentions of that parent are good, who tells you, look at, look at Thomas over there. See what a great job he's doing. You should be like that. They want to make you better, but that definitely affects us psychologically. I agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes there are some things that we do with love, but they are not lovely, I mean, that kind of comments I know our parents do with love and because they care for us, and and things like that. But it doesn't mean those are right things or the best ways to approach things, So
And I think depending on the personality, of that child too, it greatly impacts how they might interpret that, internalize it, and use it to shape their sense of self. So I'll share that I think my imposter syndrome unfortunately kind of came from my dad taking credit for things. And so I kind of really felt like, well, none of this is really me, like doing this. It's because, God has blessed me, or because, I have a great father who taught me how to do this. So what am I really even good at? Again, like I think a lot of that had to do with who I was as a human being too. And different advice affects us differently. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah, you're welcome.
I know we just have a few minutes left. In wrapping up, does anyone want to share anything that they took away from this conversation, or any kind of final words of wisdom they want to share about measuring success?
It's always great to catch up, to talk and to exchange ideas. Despite we are 1,000 miles away from each other, these things are extremely awesome, I will say, And thank you so much for doing this and making this happen, a reality. So I will appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining.
Yeah, it's totally privileged. For the ones that are listening us, all of us that are in this call, I would like to share Stoicism, the philosophy. If you guys want to go deeper on that, it's a really great way of being less comparative of the other people, and to define the values and the achievements or whatever you think that is a success for you, and define that for you and live as a different philosophical mind on what is be successful and what is to be happy. Because sometimes we are like, okay, I'm gonna go to college and then I'll be happy. You're off college and I'm gonna find a job and then I'll be happy. And I'll get a promotion and then I'll be happy. So that's a terrible way to live, because you're always putting your happiness on the hands of something else. Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a college degree, maybe some achievement. But if you think like that, you're never going to be happy. And I think happiness is the best way of success. And you don't need to be the best entrepreneur. You don't need to be the best professional. You don't need to be the richest person on the graveyard to be happy. when you start seeing things, and Stoicism is a really good way of philosophy to actually see that. And if you guys want to dive in that, I think it's going to free you guys up. I'm really passionate about freedom. And when I was younger, I thought the money would free me, but I saw that it's actually the opposite, because as much as you want to make, and you're always like grinding so much more and working so much more, you actually end up with less freedom than when we were middle class or anything that you were before. And sometimes it's like I value freedom more than anything else. So that's the way I see success. So if I can work less hours and be more time with my family, I would totally do that, even if that means that I won't have like the latest model of a car, or I won't have the biggest penthouse or apartment, whatever. So having the freedom to travel with my family, have the freedom to be with them, the freedom to work less hours, that's much more valuable than money for me. So that's my goal now.
Thank you so much, for sharing kind of the personal journey, the personal growth journey you've taken to moving to measuring your success differently. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate you bringing your perspective and energy to today's discussion, and feel very fortunate to be part of this community with you, and for the opportunity to bring you cooperative learning experiences each week. So we're always open to hearing your nominations for future interview guests, as well as topical chat suggestions. So please keep those coming. You can also listen to our edited podcast under Founders Voyage on your favorite podcast platform. And we have a whole variety of episodes at this point. So please give us feedback on that as well. You can also do that on our website, foundersvoyage.org. And if you would like to support the Founders Voyage podcast, you can do that directly through our Patreon. So thank you all again for joining and participating. And I hope you have a great day and evening ahead.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all so much. Take care.
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.